30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. And All About You is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. All About You is a show that's designed to let you know something about the particular guest's life story and career. And this morning on the All About You talk show, we have a person who was very instrumental in the music video scene towards many of your big hip hop and R&B artists. He has also been involved in a major film as a director as well, and he has a real interesting life story to go along with his background. The guest this morning on the All About You talk show is no other than music and film director, writer Rolando Hudson. Good morning, Rolando. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning. Pleasure to be on your show, Jonathan. It's a pleasure.
All right, it's a pleasure to have you. Rolando, could you let people know exactly where you were born and raised?
Well, I'm a Panamanian descent.
Hmm.
Came to the States when I was like 7 years old. Grew up in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and that's like right next to Brownsville from famous Mike Tyson's neighborhood.
Hmm.
So Brooklyn born. I'm Brooklyn bred, basically.
So you can't remember too much about living in Panama up until 7 years old of age?
Nah, not too much. The only thing I can remember is Carnival in that respect. That was about it, but not so much that. I remember that and yeah, Carnival and the beginning of especially the beginning of Carnival is like they call them the Congos. They come out and they scare the little kids. They all dressed in black and they run around and start to like just chastise the kids there in the neighborhood. It was a pretty awesome
Uh,
experience. I think.
did you travel
So,
back to Panama as a kid or teenager?
very little, very little. It's kind of hard trying to go back there now, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, no,
Very little.
no,
Okay.
not at all. I mean, basically, once I got here, that was it. I was been in Brooklyn.
All right. So you say you grew up in the Bronzeville section of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Was that close to where Mike Tyson grew up at?
yeah, it was fairly close. It was fairly close. I didn't really meet him, but
Uh-huh.
his reputation definitely predecessors itself, man. It
Uh,
was like everybody in the neighborhood knew about this kid that was knocking out other kids our age. You know what I mean?
uh,
Like 13 years old. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So,
Now, was Bronzeville really as rough an area as the reputation consists of when people hear about Bronzeville? Like it's a real rough place,
I
is the
mean,
thing.
it was like next to it was right. It was Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and then right next to it was Stuyvesant's Heights.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get that reputation, do or die,
Yeah.
in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Stuyvesant Heights. So going into that other neighborhoods were a little bit testy. You know what I mean? They
Mm-hmm.
were. I wouldn't say to me they weren't a bunch of gangs out back then, but it was just territorial in neighborhood, whatever
Mm-hmm.
block you lived on. It was that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're from Brownsville, or you from Ocean Hill or East New York, you know what I mean? If you go into those different area neighborhoods, then you would be battling basically to walk through it. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And
Right.
basketball games were pretty big there, especially in Fort Greene Park, Stuyvesant. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of territorial different groups playing basketballs. And when you go to these events, it would get kind of rowdy. It would be rowdy. So,
I just thought about something that you mentioned, basketball. There used to be a professional basketball player from Panama. His name was
uh,
Rolando, but I can't remember his last name.
yeah, Rolando Blackman.
Blackman,
Black,
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
a pretty
He
good
played for the Knicks.
basketball player. Oh, well, I
Yeah,
thought he played for the Dallas Mavericks. Didn't he play for the Mavericks too? Or the
I
Dallas?
think he started out on the Knicks. I know
Oh,
that for a fact. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And
Um,
then he went there. Yes.
well, did you play basketball growing up in Brooklyn? I mean, yeah,
Not a
Brooklyn.
little, a little
Mm,
bit. When by the time I got here at 7, everybody was playing basketball. So I started getting into the sport like at 13. So I came in at it later in life. You know what I mean?
okay.
So
No,
so the competition was a lot more fierce at that time. From that couple of years difference. You know.
yes. Well, I guess you had to be really good when you're playing in New York. They put out some of the best basketball players they get
For
credited
sure.
for. And so you played as a teenager, but let's just say you were okay, or were you good, or were
Yeah,
you so?
I was okay. I gravitated more into music back then when I was in Brownsville. Like I got into music. I played the trumpet. I was in a band, and I did a few things like that. So music has always been a part of me. As far as like jazz, I grew up on jazz,
Hmm.
and then a little bit of rock and roll. But then I was heavily into jazz. And then after that, I kind of segued as when I went to high school and all of that. It was started becoming more about hip hop and the music, and also noticing the difference between the jazz at that time, early parts, because a lot of sampling used to be done. A lot of hip hop artists used to sample their music from jazz artists,
Hmm.
at that time.
Well,
You know.
speaking of music, I mean, where or how did you learn how to become a music director?
So I went basically, went to when I got out of high school, went to South Shore High School, and I went to Brooklyn College and started studying a lot of trying to get study a lot of different things.
Hmm.
I started out in computers, but that didn't last too long. And then I realized that I had a little passion, so I took a couple of film classes, and I also took some television classes at the same time, and then I started getting in more, taking more art classes related to that because I felt that where my passion was. It was in the visual form,
Hmm.
more than anything. And it and learning computers back then, it was an opportunity to make a lot of money, but my passion really wasn't there.
Hmm.
At that time. You know, so I got into music that way, and into music videos. So then, well, I started doing a documentary about the evolution of hip hop music back then. When that was like my first project that I did on my own. I got to had an interest, and it was interesting because me and my boy, he was a poet, and he was getting a lot of gigs every weekend doing stuff, and and I was taking these film classes, and it's like, you're a filmmaker. Well, why don't you show me something? It was like,
Hmm.
yes, well, once you can show me something, my argument was like, all you got to do is sit down and write stuff and go perform it. I gotta get a camera, I gotta get a crew, I gotta get the story, I gotta go do all of this stuff, and he was always like, yeah, so what? You know what I mean? So what? I did mine, you do yours. So it started out as a bet on me trying to do something. So we had a bet, like I had 2 months to get something together.
Hmm.
And it was coincidentally I started working at it. It took a little bit longer than 2 months, but it went into like 3 months. But once I started like finding my way around, and I met like people in my circle. I met Russell Simmons,
Hmm.
and I met Andre Harrell.
Hmm.
I met Russell Simmons through his brother, his older brother, when I moved out to Queens, Rochdale Village. And so I used to hang out with him. We used to, ride bicycles and hang out and stuff like that. And I told him what I was doing. And then I met a couple of other people where I got some equipment. I worked at a place called CSC at that time. CSC was like a rental house back in the day. And so a lot of news companies used to come there and rent equipment from them. Documentary filmmakers, you come out there and rent equipment from them. And I used to have to check out the equipment. I would test it before, anyone would get it. and take it out on the field and make sure that it was working fine. And after that, after working there a while, they would give you the equipment on the weekends and to do whatever you want to do. You just have to have it back there on, Monday morning. And then I got a little crew. I ran into a couple of filmmakers, some DPs back in the day. I told them what I was doing. I was doing this documentary on the evolution of hip hop. And my concept was that hip hop has been around. It's in our DNA basically. And the things the chant, the call and response that was happening to us during slavery evolved into the blues of singing and storytelling and singing all these things on top of music. And then it evolved to where my thing was I wasn't going to go that far. I was going to do it literally. So I interviewed a guy named Greg Tate. He's no longer with us. He used to be a music editor for the Village Voice back in the day. And we talked a lot. I interviewed him. And then I got lucky. Because I started becoming friends with Russell Simmons and Andre Harrell. Russell was getting ready to do the last show that Run DMC was doing. And it was at a place called in Mount Vernon. It was going to be their last hip hop show. Instead of doing all these like the Roseland and all these smaller venues, they were going to do Madison Square Garden. And I met this promoter. Well, really, Andre Harrell said to me, "Hey, you better go there. If you want to do this documentary, you should do it. Go to this and document me because this is going to be my last time on the stage as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde." And then Russell was like, pretty much saying the same thing. And I had started having more footage before that night came. I went and interviewed Russell's father and asked him about what he thought about his son being in hip hop. And, he was totally against it. He was more of an educator and he felt that hip hop was just a passing thing. So I interviewed him. And then before we got to this night, my other bigger interview was I had called up James Brown and Keith Haring. Not Keith Haring, I'm sorry. Gil Scott Haring. I had spoken to him on the phone and made an appointment to see him. Both of these two artists were going to be at the Black Caucus convention in the spring. So I hooked up with my buddies. We got in a van, went out to DC, after calling both of them multiple times on the phone, being persistent, getting them on the phone, agreeing to coming down there on that date. And so my first day was supposed to be with Gil Scott Haring. I went to his manager's house. We sat there. Gil had a really awesome night beforehand. It was a show. So he was like sleeping in the other room. So I met him. I met his manager that came out and said, hey, sit down, hanging out, just chill for a minute, bro. And, we'll be ready. And we just sat there long and time just went by and time went by. And so he basically said, hey, when do we meet for dinner tonight? And we could talk about what you want to do. And I had big ideas. I wanted to shoot in front of the White House and stuff like that, in the hood, all that kind of stuff. Really spent some time with them. So we went there, and so we had dinner, and then, I told him my ideas, and he said, yeah, I'm down to do it tomorrow. I'm down to do it. We talked about him being the godfather. I felt he was one of the godfathers of hip hop, because he had spoken word on top of music. And then, so we, after dinner, the next day, he didn't show up. He didn't show up. And I think my lesson that I learned when I seized the opportunity while he was there, I should have had the cameras rolling and just interviewed him and just kept it moving.
Well, excuse me,
hard yeah.
Rolando, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to get to one part. You at some point would eventually make your first video. I know you had mentioned earlier, at least off of the air, we talked about you had an opportunity to be with the Fat Boys and some type of deal or whatever didn't actually work out. But
exactly.
During this hip hop era, you said or let's let people know the first music video that you had
Yeah,
directed
produced, directed. Yeah,
was Dana Dane's Nightmares music video.
of the night. Yeah, nightmares of the night.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you don't mind, can you let people know a little bit about what it was like working on that particular music video? Because that was a real creative type of
Yeah.
comical, but still creative music video.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that video I did that with Profile Records at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and that was a video, that was a record label that Run DMC was on,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really persistent. I had a little demo reel after I did my documentary. I had put it together and made a little demo reel, and I shot the Frat Boys and Force MDs. They were all in the locker room, and
Mm-hmm.
that was at this last show that was going to happen with Russell Simmons
Mm-hmm.
and Andre Harrell, the last show in Mount Vernon. And so I used that, and they got a deal with Profile Records to shoot Dana Dane, Night News of the Night. They just say, here's some money, go shoot this video, and come back with us. This is my first video. So working with Dana Dane was great. I had to do it in a weekend. I got the opportunity of using Russell's office space, which he had moved down to lower. It was the Lower East Side. It was a loft apartment that he was sharing with Leo Cohen. And they gave me a shot. They say, "Hey, just put it back together on Monday morning. Put the desks and everything back." So I made a simple video that had a comedic, twist to it. Basically, him being in a psychiatrist's room and going through the whole nightmares of the night, doing a white psych in his office, and trying to tell the story. So that was my first video, and it got a lot of play, and I got a lot of attention from that. I went on from there. I went on to do LL Cool J, I'm Bad, and I Need Love.
Mm-hmm.
Houdini, How Many Friends, Friends, and Freaks Come Out at Night. I worked on that one. So there, and then I started doing a lot of R&B and stuff. I did matter of fact, I'm sorry. I did Heavy D and the Boys. Did two videos. I did two guy videos. I worked with Salt and Pepper. I did Push It video back in the day. And all of that was basically, you know, my repertoire at that point. I met a couple of people that were very influential to me. A woman named McCauley from Jive Records, that put me on the map. So we were clocking it. We were doing it.
Well, Rolando, let's go back a little bit now. You say you mentioned the LL Cool J video. This video came out on Bad in 1987.
Yeah.
Somehow along the line, people might have missed the message that it was like an anti-drug message that he was trying to promote. I'm talking about LL Cool J, because
Yeah.
in the beginning of the video, he has his girlfriend or his friend passing out some flyers. So
Yeah.
I'm asking you this: what role did you play? Because the next thing you know, she's being kidnapped, and then LL is starting to look for her. So how were you interacting on this particular video? Just to kind of break down a little bit of the segments.
Well, I created a story break. I broke down the music, and one thing that captured me about the music was the courageous crack sample that they used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, they kind of gave it a comedic, but just kind of more of a comedic kind of hyper reality kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's real, but it ain't really happening.
Right.
And the drug message during that time was, it was a big crack epidemic that
Mm-hmm.
was happening in our community. And my thing was always trying to tell stories and telling it in a musical form. And all the videos that I did back then were always trying to tell a story because I enjoyed the filmmaking process. And I felt that I was learning filmmaking on my own, basically doing it,
Mm-hmm.
at that time. So that was the main message, that he kidnapped his girlfriend because they wanted him to stop promoting this message of anti-crack in the neighborhood.
Right.
It was bad for business.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was the mob. It was a satire on the mob.
Did you like this particular sound and style of LL a little bit differently than his previous album, Radio, or it didn't really matter to you? Because this one sounded a little bit different. He had different producers on this particular album, comparable to
Yeah.
having Rick Rubin on the Radio album.
Yeah, it was definitely it was more homegrown. I think by when Rick Rubin started getting him, he was started expanding to the West Coast market and
Hmm.
that sound and more of a, I guess, rock vibe to it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That kind of nuance. But yeah, he had some good. It was some good, lyrics that he had there.
And how did you
You know.
feel now working on "I Need Love" video by LL? How did this all come about?
So it came. I mean, it came about from the fact that I'm Bad did so well.
Hmm.
It became so popular at that time. So I had a shot to do the other one. And that one I was just trying to show the life of a teenage superstar. You know what I mean? The beginning of a teenage superstar.
Hmm.
That came from the rap. It was a rap artist.
Hmm.
And I opened up the video with them the night before. They're waking up with the champagne bottles, the whole vibe at that time.
Hmm.
And he comes out and he has to do a morning interview and setting it up for that. And the fact that a lot of rap at that time was getting a lot of negative publicity. You know what I mean? No one wanted to be associated with it. They felt it was a fad.
Hmm.
And so that's why I put the parental kind of thing in there to give it that vibe.
Did you kind of like this video a little bit different or better than the "I'm Bad" video? I mean, when you're making
Yeah.
the video, how do you have to focus yourself on if you don't, let's say for instance, you don't particularly, something about this sound you might not really be feeling. Do you still have to be professional enough to really adjust and go along with everything that's designed that you're putting together?
Yeah, you do. I
Mm-hmm.
think you gotta really see what the artist wants, and also the people that are paying for the video. You have to recognize their needs too.
Right.
And a lot of times, you try to push it a little bit because I felt that a lot of, especially music video filmmakers in general, we start getting pigeonholed into being a certain
Mm-hmm.
type of director, and we can only do this and we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of attitude about it.
Well,
But
Rolando, excuse me, did you look at it as having fun? Like, or was this like a real? I mean, it is a real job, but
yeah,
somewhat like an artist. Do you feel like you're really enjoying your childhood dream, or was this just a?
yeah,
It
sure,
was
of
okay.
course, yeah, yeah, definitely, it is. I mean, it's the most gratifying feeling, something that you think about in your head, and then you can actually see it in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a living art form, as they say. You know what I
Right.
mean? You think about this, you see those images in your head, and here you are. Now you can see it on an actual screen. You can see it. It's so gratifying that you want to watch it over and over again. I remember the first videos I did. I used to just spend all night just watching the same video all night long.
Y- Yeah.
Especially after it's finished, after you finish doing the editing and the process. Yeah, but the process, the best to me, my process I liked the most was being on set when
Mm-hmm.
you start to see it coming alive. And also, I like preparation for it. I like, the beginning of making videos or doing anything creative is learning, the stuff that you want to do, like the way it's going to look, the design of it, all of that stuff, the way that you really see it in your head. And when you start to work with other people, they're bringing that vision onto paper, onto the screen itself, so that it makes it even more enjoyable. That's the best part. And then the reality is, let's make this happen. And so what happens is you try to get 100% of your creativity, but more than most time is always falls into the 85 to 90%, where things don't happen the way they need to be, or creatively.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that 100% all the time, but you try to get there as close as you can, 90 to 95% of it.
Right.
Is
Right.
your vision, because you have to deal with the record companies, you have to deal with different personalities. It's a collaborative effort here, and sometimes you have to answer to people that spend the money.
Any particular music video that stands out? I mean, I love the I mean, I love the "I'm Bad" video. I mean, that's one of
Yeah.
my favorites. But I'm just want to ask you now, any particular music video that you can
Yeah.
remember?
I mean, I think that would be that to me was a big one for me.
Mm,
That I liked. I did working overtime with Diana Ross. I mean, working with her was a great thing to work with a woman of that stature.
hmm.
That was great. And I like I Need Love a lot for some reason.
You like that one?
You know, and The Rain. No, The Rain was one of my other ones that I liked a lot. And it took me into another area because I was able to create a rain. I we had rain towers in on Bleecker Street back in the day. I don't know if you know New York.
Hmm.
Bleecker Street now is like crazy. You could not go down there with rain towers and a crane and shoot a scene with two people walking down the middle of the street in the rain.
Yeah.
And so that was a big achievement for me to be able to do that and have that much control to create the scene.
Well,
But
excuse me. In that music video, what stands out about Orange Juice Jones? It was a good song, but towards the end, when he catches his girlfriend cheating on him, and
yeah.
then he starts saying different. I can't remember word for
Yeah,
word,
yeah,
but he
yeah.
started really chastising her and telling her this and that. What role again was that? Because I guess when you make the music video, they're not actually really singing during the
No,
video.
they're lip sync.
They're lip syncing. But did
Exactly.
you have anything to add towards the end of that particular video? Or was that all pretty
No,
much
I just cut it at that point. I mean, I did cut it so you could see that ending scene. Yeah,
right?
that was it. But no, vocally, no, I didn't have any control over that.
Uh huh.
For sure.
Now,
But
Rolando, you also worked on the film Strictly Business.
yeah, yeah, I was the first director on that one. And that was definitely, and that came about through a lot of the music videos that I was working on. And so music videos were getting really popular, and at that time, they were still getting a lot of backlash when a lot of directors were making the crossover into film
Hmm.
because Hollywood didn't really want us there, and they felt that we were working in the short form, as they call it, and not telling enough stories, as they call it back then, that they weren't willing to take the gamble on it. But that came about through the efforts of Andre Harrell and Nelson George was another. He was also a writer at the Village Voice. My partner Pam Gibson and all of us. He came up with this idea of doing this around this woman who's like she's the it. Go Beverly. He was originally called Go Beverly. Then it was changed to Strictly Business. And basically, it was about this one woman who's just she falls in love with this guy. This hasn't he was basically acculturated. He wasn't grown up as in the black community, and he meets this girl as just being she's a nightlife kind of person, and loved the nightlife, loved the dancing, and that girl. She's that girl that came into the room and everybody wanted to be with. And here we have this straight up dude, grows up in Scarsdale, mother's, interracial family. That was the essence of it. That was my dream of the movie. It didn't work out that way. But that was it. And he falls in love with somebody and it changes his life around,
Hmm.
in a positive sense. But and Halle Berry was chosen for that, and things worked out as it could be. It was a good movie
Well,
for
one
what it was.
thing, Rolando, it seemed like you came along at the time when most of the artists that you were working with was kind of in the transitionary stages of, guess, their careers going to a different level. They were already good. You
Hmm.
mentioned LL Cool J, Salt and Pepper,
Yeah,
Guy, Orange
hmm,
Juice Jones kind of faded, just like Dana
yeah,
Dane. But they were still
yeah,
talented and good. But
yeah,
did you
yeah,
feel? But could you kind of see when you were working with these artists, like LL Cool J in
yeah.
particular, that he was really going to be something special at that time?
Yeah, I definitely saw that with LL for sure. I mean,
Hmm.
the moment I met him, when he used to come up to my office and we would talk, he would be like practicing in the mirror in front of me, showing up to like one of the things about filmmaking and back then especially it was like there was a renaissance of creativity happening during that time. So there was people that were dancing, that were into choreography, that were into styling, and I was a conduit to meet a lot of those people during that time. And he would come into my office, we would have meetings, we would talk about the project. He would rehearse in my office, would show up, and we had like at least two dates before we actually shot the video that we would do rehearsals, dance rehearsal, and then talk about shooting it. So and then, but I started meeting a lot of people in the community that were talented and bringing them into the fold, and using them as choreographers and using them as a stylist and editors that I met at that time and DPs, and then you met a lot of the key grips and the electrics, and so you start developing a crew of people all the time that you would keep on working with, but and also new people. But there was just so much creativity back then with people always getting together, working with each other a lot. So
Yeah, well, definitely you should feel very proud about that proven track record. I mean, timing is everything, and at that time, that was the right time to come along with the music videos in particular. I think it's kind of faded off a little bit today,
yeah,
but it was really popular, and people really enjoyed the music videos when you would make a song. Some of the things that you're currently working with today, could you kind of let people know now any particular projects that you're either
yeah.
involved with or about to be involved with?
Yes, so I'm working on a project. It's called The Afro Games. It takes place in South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa,
Hmm.
and it's basically about basketball awareness on the continent. There's been a big push for basketball awareness on the continent in the last 5 years or so. NBA has poured a lot of money into it, and there's a league called the BAL, Basketball African League, and they have teams, professional teams. So I got involved with this project with a woman named Valerie Graves. She was a creative director for Uniworld,
Hmm.
and now so we got together. A couple of us got together, came up. It was her brainstorm. She's the founder of the company. So it's a festival about the culture, about the basketball culture. And basketball culture right now is hip hop culture. It's basically the same. It's a lifestyle sport. And so what we do once we last year was our inaugural year of doing it. And we did it at the Stanton Galleria in Stanton, South Africa. And it was a collegiate team that plays a professional basketball team in South Africa. And it's centered around a festival of music, art, culture. I'm a piano and Afro beats is the vibe there, and that's what we're trying to show with it. But before we get to the date of Afro Games, what we've done, we have another component called the Road to Afro Games, and the Road to Afro Games is a three-on-three game that happens between 28 collegiate colleges in South Africa. This month is the beginning of our start to do this. And the final three-on-three play team that wins, they play a professional basketball team. And there's a monetary involvement of $1,000 for the winner. We've been doing that, but you can look it up on the website and see what we did last year. It's called The Afro Games.
Hmm. And again, this is going to be in South Africa.
Yeah, it's going to be in South Africa in September 27th at a place called Constitutional Hill. Constitutional Hill is now a worldwide museum, but it was formerly a prison that Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela and Muhammad Gandhi stayed there. They had to do time there. So now it's a museum, and we are doing the final games there, and that's where the festival is going to be held at, where there's going to be live music, activities, a galleria, art, into the culture that we are, the all culture of Black diaspora.
Hmm. And you still reside in New York currently, and are you working?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm in New York. I'm in Long Island right now,
Okay.
Elmont, repping Elmont.
Right.
But yes,
Okay, I was saying right. Okay, so basically, I mean, looking back at your life and career, is there anything that you would like to work on or be part of that you just can't seem to get connected to? And I guess I'm almost kind of asking you, are you still hungry for the directing role that you have in you to
Yeah.
constantly? Okay.
Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
Definitely. I
All
mean,
right.
this Project Afro game is basically is going to have a documentary component, and that's basically what's where the college teams are playing each other. I want to get into their live stories and see what they're, tell the story of basketball is new in Africa. So tell the story of these young kids that are trying to make it in the NBA or the BAL
Mm-hmm.
as professional players and tell their stories and share their lifestyle. And what I found, and also the music there, what I found by going to South Africa and seeing the things that are going on there, it's a lot like when the beginning of hip hop. I don't know if you've been listening to Piano and Afro beats, but that sound is like the beginning of hip hop when I started out in this business. When I got there and I started what they're doing, and the people are, the same vibe is happening there. The music is changing. I think between social media and what we have here, our worlds are more connected now, so it's happening more rapidly. You can see it. Their
Mm-hmm.
influence on our culture is it's one and the same. You know.
Well, Rolando, you kind of came along in the beginning stages of the hip hop era, and
Yeah.
you've seen the transitionary period when it became more of being able to tell a message, then it became more commercialized. And I
Yeah.
don't know today where hip hop really is at. It's extremely popular and definitely have a dominant presence. But would you say the overall status of hip hop, are you kind of satisfied where it's at, or would you like to see some things about the hip hop revolution or hip hop in general be a little bit better in some areas if you had your choice? Just kind of want to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I mean, I think to me, I love Kendrick Lamar. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think he's done a lot for hip hop, and he's a poet, and he's used his musical form to express that,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Um, I like Future, a little bit of Future. I've been listening to him. I like his videos. I think I mentioned that to you the other day.
Mm-hmm.
That this last video that end, I'm that in, then So I don't want to say the word,
Yeah, yeah.
but you know what we're talking about. I'm
Right,
that in.
right, right, right.
So, but I like the video, and I love the fact that it just shows his lifestyle and what it is for, like, a baller. He's like came up from nothing and he's balling, and showing that side of Paris, and just his lifestyle. I don't like the other stuff that's just about tits and ass. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets boring, and how much money you got. It's
Mm.
like a little bit of that. It gets boring to me.
But see,
Because so much.
yeah, but
Mm.
see, excuse me. One thing I guess I'm having, it's not hard to figure out, but sometimes I kind of wonder. Nothing has really changed with the drugs, the guns, the violence. But for some
Yeah,
reason, it seemed like the hip hop artists, even when we mentioned the I'm Bad video and other rap videos, I don't know what it was. Maybe it wasn't enough money back then to make, but they seem as rough of element that they came from. Most of them, not all, but most of them
yeah,
still had something that they wanted to promote as a better life, to go up against drugs and violence and guns. And
yeah.
I don't say that doesn't exist in some areas today, but I don't get a feeling that that message is as strong as it used to be back then. Do you see it that way, or is it other factors that might be keeping hip hop artists from promoting something positive against some of
Yeah,
those
I
vices?
mean, I have to agree with you. I do see it feel that way too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it. There are a couple of nuggets in there of people that are doing their thing
Mm-hmm.
that we don't see enough of.
Right.
But yeah, you are. The majority is a lot of it. It's so beat driven that you just put the same lyrics on the same beats. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
on some hype beat,
Right.
That's where it is, and once that's it, it's just that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't know, for some reason I started liking the music that's coming out of the continent, the Afro beats and the Amapiano. Um, I mean, they're getting into the same kind of rut too, but I don't know, for some reason I'm feeling they're coming into it a little bit slower. There is a little bit of message to what they're saying, and there is a little bit of the glorification of the money and the drugs. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a little bit more lifestyle kind of stories that they're telling. I mean, growing up in the hood and making that transition and now balling, and you know what I mean, and going back.
Mm-hmm.
There's songs like that I find, and I just love the beats. I mean, I would like to see a lot more American artists use the beats, because it's drums. It's all about the drums. And I was saying to somebody else about it. I said it's why I like it so much. Is like, how can you refuse the beat of a drum? It's like a heartbeat. It's part of your nature. To vibe with that.
Well,
So,
as
but
we excuse me,
here.
yeah, as we're getting closer to the end of the show, Jay-Z gets credited as being the greatest hip hop MC of all time.
Yeah,
But some people, particularly even recently that I talked to, they kind of dispute that they don't think he really is the greatest MC. I think record wise, selling
yeah.
albums and business wise, clearly he stands out as the best. But let's just say for a raw to raw talent level, would you say he's the best, or I mean, how would you view him as being the best MC of all
I
time?
think as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, as an artist, I mean, right now, I'm definitely, it's all hands down is Kendrick Lamar. I
Kendrick Lamar,
mean,
right?
exactly. And yeah, business wise, yes, he's been he's
Mm-hmm.
been the best MC ever.
And
Come
for
on. I
business,
I
right?
can't he's been a great businessman, you know? And we don't know what Tupac or Biggie would have been at this point in their lives if
Mm-hmm.
they were still alive. But yeah, I mean, I know that once Biggie went, he took the spot. That was
He
right. He
did.
was right. He
Mm-hmm.
stepped up, so you know.
And then you think maybe through longevity, LL, because he went into television and
Yeah.
film, he might not be able to relate so much as a hip hop artist today, because people might see him more as a television star and a movie star. But would he be in the top 5 or the top 10 as one of the greatest hip hop artists of all
Yeah,
time?
I would say that for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
would definitely say that for sure. Yeah,
Right.
Ella would be in the top 10 for
Top
sure.
10, exactly.
Top
Well,
five.
top 5 on top of that. It's
Top
it's
five.
it's so much talented artists. If you go from the history of hip hop towards where we are today,
Uh,
that it's when you get yourself in the top 5, that's saying a lot, or the top 10.
exactly. I know.
Um, but this was a great interview. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
talking to you. As I say to
Yeah.
every
Thank you.
artist towards the end of the show, is there any last thing that you would like for people to know about yourself or what you're currently working with or towards? Feel free to express yourself.
My goal is basically to develop and document the talent in South Africa and Africa, and be part of this Black diaspora of filmmaking and commerce. Under this administration, I mean, I think a lot of people looking and getting out of the country. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like a lot of businesses should start looking into some infrastructure in Africa. I mean, I haven't been out to a lot of parts of it, but I've been to South Africa. I've been to Egypt, um, and my wife goes to Ghana a lot. So the infrastructure in these places are becoming more open to us. I mean, a lot of the businesses that take place there, 30% of it has to be African, because they don't want to be going through have some colonists coming over there taking over their shit.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like what we're doing with Afro Games. It's like we have a counterpart in South Africa that's working with us on this. So it's just not all American, but it's Black American,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we need to join our forces and keep it going.
Well, those sound like a very great ending segment. I always like to try to find a great way to end a particular show, and I think you just outlined a great segue to end this particular segment. Real interesting discussion with you. Definitely keep up the good work with what you're doing, and I think your work and your history speaks volumes because you put together some of the greatest hip hop videos at a span that people may not be aware of. Now, hopefully, they were able to get that type of information that was presented to you this morning.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show, man.
You're welcome.
Been
It
fun.
was my
All right, thank
pleasure.
you. All
Take
right.
care. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I had just enjoyed hosting this edition of the All About You talk show with music and film director, writer Rolando Hudson, and I thought he brought back some good memories, some good projects that he was involved with in the early days of the hip hop and R&B music sound. And I hope for you, the viewers, you was able to find this particular show interesting, enlightening, and informative. We'll have next week, we'll be doing a face-to-face public affairs talk show. So until I see you again, for viewers and audience out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.